Everybody was just absolutely freaking out today on Breakfast Club when you were going over this, Steve, because everybody goes through it all the time as a loan officer. I don't care if you've been in the business
Yeah,
35 years or 5 weeks.
man.
You know, we come across deals and we
Yeah.
think we've got everything good to go and everything looks great. Then at, some would say the 11th hour, something pops up that was
Oh
unexpected.
no.
Yeah,
Oh
and then
no.
suddenly we're in jeopardy of either a delayed closing or maybe even a failed close. And
Man.
these are tough conversations to have with either way. It's a tough
Yeah.
conversation because I think all of us as loan officers we pride ourselves on being able to close on time. Good information. We know what we're talking about. You can trust
Right.
us. You can trust my
Yeah.
pre-approval letter. And then all of a sudden something pops up. We're going to be honest, Steve.
Ruh-roh.
Sometimes it might be our fault.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be our fault, right? But
Yeah.
pretty rare. Usually it's something we didn't foresee happening, something the borrower did, or a condo issue
Yeah.
or whatever
Yeah.
the case may
Yeah.
be. And then we got to deal with it. And then the response with most agents that, is always like, well, how come why didn't we know
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And so, but you were talking about it on Breakfast Club today, and you have this system called VEI, which is Validate, Educate, and Instruct, and everybody
Yeah.
was just like gobbling it up. And I was wondering if on
Yeah.
this podcast, you might be able to just touch on it. Of course, not as lengthy as we went over in Breakfast Club today, but maybe you could just kind of touch on that a little bit for anybody who's listening or watching this podcast. And if they want
This
more information, they can reach out to
oh,
us,
yeah,
So,
and this is a great, like, this is such a, like, hey, when you were just saying that, I thought about it. You get the call, the underwriter says we have a problem, the pit hits your stomach, and it's
mm,
like, dude, I got to call the agents.
mm,
And here's like 23 years of doing this.
mm.
Where Validate, Educate, and Instruct came from, getting tired of just getting beat over the head. I mean, it's like, because look, the reality is this, and you and I know, we've been doing this a long time. I don't care how good you are. One
Mm.
in 20 deals, something is going to happen.
Something's going to happen.
Well, perfect example. We have one of the guys here in the network, super great guy. This actually came up because of that. I do coaching. You and I do coaching every Tuesday with our guys and girls and our branch managers here inside the network at Success Mortgage Partners, which we get the privilege of leading together. I love it. And so Chris came and he's like, dude, I got bad news. And so every Tuesday we do 30 minutes of just laser coaching. It's like, hey, what came up? What are we doing? What came up? What are we doing?
Yeah.
We call it
It's really
momentum
cool.
builders coaching.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And so Chris comes in kind of defeated, and it was
Yeah.
like, bro, uh, they didn't file their returns.
Duh.
And it was like, oh my gosh, okay. So but then it's like, well, what do I do? It wasn't his fault. Like at the end of the day, we had it worked out. I mean, he had it approved 1 year tax return. Something changed. The bar did something. Now it required 2 years. Now it's
Oh,
like,
got it. Yeah.
yeah, so it wasn't even his fault. But guess what? Frank, he gets to call the agent. The agent gets to what? Whop him over the head.
Right.
It's like that whack-a-mole. You remember that? Like at
Yeah,
the
yeah, of
county
course.
fair? And
Yeah.
it's like, kapak, kapak.
Yeah.
And so I think I just got tired of getting whack-a-mole, man. It was like, this is dumb. How, like, it ain't my fault. Sometimes it is, but half the
Yeah.
time it's not. I'm
Most
pretty
time
good.
it's not, right?
Yeah,
It's
well,
just
I'm pretty
something
good at it.
happens. Yeah.
So here's what we did was I started realizing this. Whoever says it first wins.
Mm.
And where I got that from, it was so funny. My twin brother's a pastor. He's been pastoring a church for like 12 years. And literally when he started the church, Frank, he would put out the church calendar, which was really his family calendar, because
Mm.
we're launching a church together, right? There's 7 of us. We started with 7. Now there's thousands of us.
Yeah.
And so the church calendar, quote unquote, if you're watching on YouTube, hey, by the way, if you're on YouTube or wherever you're at, subscribe, like, share this with somebody. We don't say that enough, Frank.
Yeah, you're
So
right. Yeah.
subscribe, like, share. We'd love for you to do that. It helps us and get the word out. But in air quotes, he would put the church calendar out, and then Steph and I would have to move our yearly calendar around the church calendar.
Right.
And about year 3, I got wise to this, and I told Steph, I said, you know what? He puts that out the first week of December. We're doing ours in October, November, and I'm going to send it to him. And you know what I'm going to tell him? Hey, because remember, there's only a handful of us, right? We're
Right.
launching a church. And I said, hey, bro, man, I want to be a part of everything we're doing. Here's next year's calendar. So if it works for you, build. And so he would
Yeah,
have
here's
to
our
work it around.
calendar. Yeah.
He'd have to work it around our calendar. And he's my twin brother. He's my best friend. So And what I learned, and I know it sounds silly, but it was whoever calendared it first won.
Mm,
And what I began to realize was, wow, that applies in conversations.
mm,
See, if I know my conversation with you, Frank, is going to be, you're going to be angry, you're going to be upset, disappointed. Your commission's in jeopardy, which your mortgage payment might be attached to, like
mm-hmm.
paying your mortgage might be attached to that closing, which
Deal
is supposed
closing,
to
yeah.
happen in 7 days. Your valid frustration and anxiety is real.
Mm,
And so what I realized was this. I'm not waiting for them, and most of them didn't. I mean, I had good relationships, still do, but the ones typically the lower producers it hurt the worst because it just didn't have as many deals. So Frank, I started doing this. I needed to validate what I knew they were going to say, feel, or do. I needed to educate them on what we did and why we are where we're currently at. And then I've got to lead the conversation and instruct them on what's the likelihood of closing, what's our next step, what's being done, and how you can expect me to communicate through the rest of this
mm.
transaction.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Because see what happens is if I say it first, hey, listen, Frank, you know, it and like I'll just run it real quick. And I know we can't go as deep. We
Mm-hmm.
talk a lot about this in Alliance, and you and I do our coaching here at the network.
Mm-hmm.
We go really deep in this kind of stuff, but I think it'll help our listeners. But here's what happens is, hey Frank, it's Steve. How you doing, brother? It's your Tuesday update. You got a couple of minutes? Yeah, I got a couple of minutes. Hey, listen, I know we're supposed to be closing the Smith file on next Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. Hey, listen, man, something came up today which is going to put that closing in jeopardy. And I just want to walk through with you. Got a minute? Okay. Hey, listen, if I were sitting there and listen, what are they going to say?
Yeah.
We're
Why
supposed
do
to
we
be
just find
closing.
out now? Yeah.
Yeah, why did we just now find out? Like,
Mm.
wasn't the pre-approval solid?
Yeah.
Haven't you had the contract long enough? And I mean, we're talking about literally 6 days away from closing.
Mm.
Is this a dead deal or is
Mm.
this just a delay? Like
Right.
you
Mm-hmm.
have to say, what's the bad news I'm going to give? What are the questions they're going to ask? Because if you'll take 3 to 5 minutes and just say, "Oh yeah," and for me, Frank, I wasn't that smart. I just got tired of hearing the same thing. Like mine was, dude, I just heard it over and over and over.
Mm.
I didn't know enough to think through it. I just was like, "Oh yeah, this is what they always say," and
Mm.
then I just started building a response to it. Take 100% ownership. Hey, listen, if I were sitting in your shoes. I know we got the contract on the 1st. Today is the 12th. We're supposed to be closing on the 20th.
Mm.
But you got to know the dates that you got
Mm.
the contract because
Mm.
here's the thing. If I go in and I don't know the dates, you may have only had that deal for 7 days and
Mm.
they're still saying, why did it take so long? Or you may have had it 30 days and now you really got to fall on a sword and say,
Mm.
hey, listen, it's 100% my responsibility. We've had it in house for the last 30 days and just walk them through the timeline. And so I think it's so important that I got to understand what's the question they're going to ask and then validate it because when you do it, doesn't mean it takes the emotion out. It just deflates the heightened emotion, the
Mm.
hollering, the screaming, which most of them don't do that. But at least I can come in and just deflate it a little bit.
Mm.
And then here's the other thing I would say too, Frank, and chime in as you see fit. But in the beginning, I fell into the trap of, because we've always had great teams, and it was like, hey, my processor missed this, and when it, and I used to say things like this, Frank, when the file got to underwriting, the underwriter jumped in and they calculated the depreciating income differently
Yeah.
than we did,
Mm-hmm.
and now here's what you've done unknowingly. You've
You're
now
throwing your
taken all
team under the bus. Yeah.
yeah, you've thrown your team under the bus. So here's
Yeah.
what they do is they don't trust you really moving forward.
Right.
But the second thing is I used to hear from my dear agent friends, they'd be like, Steve, you got to tell me what the heck is underwriting? Like
Mm.
all I know is files go there to
To
die.
die. Yeah.
Like is there a cemetery there or what?
Yeah.
And I literally would have to spend time just like I'll never forget talking to Brandon Frank and I said, "Hey brother, you know what underwriting is? It's an excuse."
Mm.
"What do you mean it's an excuse?" If the loan officer knows the guidelines up front, all the underwriter's doing is validating the file package they put
Right.
together. That's it. So if
Mm-hmm.
they're saying it died in underwriting, what you're really saying is the loan officer and his team didn't know how to put together a file.
Right. Right.
And I don't say that poking at loan officers because you don't have to know guidelines. I don't know updated guidelines now,
Yeah.
but the reality is we blame underwriting when the reality is the loan officer and the front end team should be putting deals together. So what you've
Mm.
got to do is just say, "Hey, listen, my team and I, we went through it. We got some verifications back. They didn't line up, created a gap. I'm looking at the likelihood of being able to salvage this deal. Like I'll give you an example. We looked at the pay stubs, we looked at the W-2s, we looked at the complete loan application. When we got the written verification, there came back variable income.
Mm.
And listen, you know what? I dropped the ball. I didn't realize I should have asked him if his income was variable. He worked 32 hours this week and
Mm.
38 hours last week and
Mm.
40 hours the week after that. And was it consistent? I missed it. And I
Mm.
got to tell you, for me, it was the first time I'd seen variable income. But the reality is, I can't blame the underwriter. The
Mm.
guidelines didn't change.
Mm.
I missed it. And
Mm.
guess what, Frank? I didn't even know the borrower's name. I didn't know, I'd never seen the file. I had a pre-approval specialist, I had a mortgage expert, I had a loan partner, I had a processor, I had an
Mm.
underwriter. Everybody went through the file. And it wasn't until about 3 to 5 days prior to closing that we literally got a written VOE and variable income popped up.
Mm.
I could have said, everybody missed it. You know what I
Right.
said? I
Mm.
missed it. At
Mm.
the end of the day, I am the loan officer. And Brandon, I got to tell you, my man, that was a mistake on my part. And that will be a new part of my process is to
Mm.
ask and verify variable income moving forward.
Mm.
But here's where we're at. I'm looking at the file, and based on the information I have, I'm 85% confident we'll still be able to close.
Mm.
But here's what I know. We're going to at least need 2 or 3 days.
Mm.
Now, I'm going to educate them on what my next step is. So, what we're doing right now is 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to need 24 hours to get confirmation. And here's the good news, man. I've got the president of our company who runs our operations on heightened alert. And she and her team know that the minute the information comes in, they're going to review it. And I promise you this, what we're known for is turning 83% of our no's into yeses. And although we ran into an obstacle, she is 85% confident with one,
Mm.
2, 3 pieces of information. This
Mm.
deal's still a go.
Mm.
The thing that we know will have to happen is we'll need an extra 3 days
Mm.
extension.
Mm.
So here's what I'm going to do. Today it's 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to text you at 2 and I will call you before 4 with a solution. Are
Mm.
we good?
Mm.
Hey, let me ask you this, Brandon. I'm going to call the buyer. I'm going to make sure they know exactly what's going on. Is there anything like you that I need to know in that conversation? And here's the other thing. I know calling that listing agent's a tough deal. I want you to know this. I'll be happy to call them.
Mhm.
Let me take the sword for the listing agent unless you feel like you need to. Tell
Mhm.
me what we're going to
I
do
like how
here.
you give the buyer agent that option because sometimes they want to do it. Sometimes they
Yeah,
want to take
yeah.
control of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Hey there, if you're loving the tips so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss out on more cool free tips coming your way. I'd also love to hear from you. Make sure to drop a comment below and let me know what you think, or what it is you want to see next. And we'll see you on the inside. See you. Yeah, you got a strong buyer's agent. They want to, but I'll tell you this, sometimes they don't know enough of the details and they're going to look, what are they going to get? The same thing you just got. Like they're
Mm.
going to get the whack-a-mole.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
but that's what a true partner does is it says, I'll be your armor bearer. And that's what I'll tell Brandon or Oscar or Lisa or any of my partners. I'll just say, hey, listen, let me make the first call. Let me take the tough blows.
Mm.
And then you come behind me and work out the details.
Mm.
Would that work for you?
Yeah.
And because I don't mind having the hard conversation because I know what they're going to say.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Look, I don't even know who you are. That's why I got my preferred
Yeah.
lender. And look, I thought we were good. You called me and told me this
Right.
was a solid
Right.
pre-approval. Look, we're 21, so I already know what they're going to say. And listen, rightfully so.
Right.
Like we can't say all agents are like that. No, no, no. I made a
No.
mistake.
That's a
It's all
problem.
right.
We got an issue. There's a
Yeah.
contract.
And,
We're
and so,
supposed to be
and then
closing, you know?
you just have to you have to
Yeah.
remove the emotion from, but listen, their emotion's valid. You don't know what's on the other side of that closing.
Right.
It could be their house is going into foreclosure.
Yeah, who
Hey, I'll
knows?
never forget this, dude. One of my, and this was a big scar I had, but it was also something that really made me who I am today. I'll never forget, Frank. I had the one of the deals that I did. It was right when EA level ones for any of our old timers who's not old timers, they're like in the 2000s. They just rolled out this level one approval. It was kind of an alt approval. It meant
Yeah.
it wasn't A paper. It was like A minus.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize. I remember it was with Chase and they rolled it out. It was a level one approval. And I locked it in as a normal loan, but
Mm.
there was a loan level pricing adjustment with it. So the rate was off, and we're a day ahead of before closing, and secondary's like, oh, you locked it wrong. You're either going to have to pay to close it or we'll need an extra day to close. So I called the buyer and he's like, oh yeah, no big deal. And he was like, totally, we can adjust the rate. He totally understood. He was shocked he
Yeah.
had the rate anyway.
Yeah.
I called the buyer's agent that was supposed to be my partner. And you know what she said? She was like, you will close that loan tomorrow and blah, 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 blah. Well, what she didn't know was I had to write a $2,500 check to close it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I drove an hour and a half to closing to close it.
Mm.
And where the buyer and everybody else would have given me a day, the person who was my partner, who actually
Didn't.
happened to be my
Mm.
brother's sister-in-law,
Mm.
refused to close that deal a day late. I wrote a check, I drove an hour and a half, and I paid for a lesson learned.
Mm.
And the reason why I say that is I have no idea what was on the other side of why that loan had to fund that day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like that, like, and come to find out the financial troubles, like it just
Yeah,
was,
there was a big reason for it.
there's
Yeah.
big reasons. And the reason why I say that is, look, that's part of where I came up with the better versus bitter
Mm.
is because then I met this sweet lady and I'm just give me some latitude. Her name was Jane Caldwell, the sweetest old lady. She's still alive and still doing real estate today.
Mm.
It's still an amazing lady. But she was probably in her 50s, which back then I was like, that's old.
Yeah.
I know that's not old. I'm 48 now. But she gave a 25-year, brand new green loan officer a chance. And when a deal went south, she was like, that's okay, honey. We'll work it out. And so you had this one horrible experience with this agent over here on this end and one precious experience over here.
Mm.
And what I really felt like God was just showing me is, look, you can get better or you can get bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And not all agents are like that. And you don't know what's on the other side of that pain.
Mm.
And so the reason why I say that is so many times we've given so much bad news where it's like, dude, they're all like that. No, no, no. You have to recognize you don't know what's on the other side of that pain. And for them, they're desperately trying to close deals. So just take the shot. But the better prepared you are, the better you are in taking the shot. Because look, I can deflate any conversation and sure, get upset. If I were in your position, I'd be upset, but I'm not going to get bitter. I'm going to get better at these conversations because I'm going to learn to validate. I'm going to learn to educate and I'm going to learn to instruct. And the better I get with those, the better I have a chance of earning their trust and confidence. And last thing, when you over communicate in a tough situation, you win partners for life.
Yep.
That's just the facts.
Yep.
Because every agent's had a deal go south, but few agents have a deal where the loan officer truly leads with clarity, without blaming and giving clear instructions on what's going to be the next step, and then clearly communicating through the process. You do that, you'll win hearts, you'll win deals, and you'll be the loan officer everybody wants to work with. So
Yeah, that was good stuff. I one of the things that really stood out to me about it in this conversation on Breakfast Club is how important it is to really have the data, right? To have the documents and the data when you're
Critical.
making that call. And what I mean by that, guys, is if you didn't pick it up, is when you're making this call, inevitably the response is going to be, why are we just finding this out now? Very common, right? Why are we just finding this out now? Well, because you've had this file for 22 days. Right? Like, why are we just finding out now? And if you don't know the exact dates of everything that exactly transpired so that you can convey that information, totally get what you're saying, right? You guys went into contract on this day. We received the contract on this day. We submitted it into underwriting on this day. On this day we did this, on this day we did that. And now you're laying out the data so they know this is why we're here. Now, it's not just you going, yeah, I know we've had it for 20 days. Sorry. Where it looks to them like you've been doing nothing. Like you've just, you got stuff in, you don't know, you guys just don't know what you're doing. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, did you see this? It's like, it's not like that. It's right. We have to have that information readily handy, when we're making that call, knowing this is the exact timeline, exactly what happened. And this is exactly why we're here today. And it had nothing to do with us sitting around going, oh my God, did anybody just notice this? That's not because that's what they're thinking. right?
Hey,
They're
well,
thinking,
you know what it overcomes, Frank? Here's
yeah,
what I would hear. They'd say, well, what, like, oh my God, like, what have you guys been doing? Like,
yeah. What are you doing?
and here's what I'll never forget. I was like, dude, we crushed this file. What do you mean? What have we been doing? Like, I know the pace that our team has run.
Yeah,
And then I went back and counted the days, and I'm like, we're 7 days in a contract.
yeah.
Like,
Pretty
like,
fast to know
but
that you've got something to work on. Yeah,
yeah, but that's where I like part of where that came from was Frank. I would hear that I'm like, well, what took? And I'm like, dude, we crush this. And so what we started doing was saying, you never have a conversation where you haven't counted the days. Here's what it'll do. It'll do one of two things. It'll validate you killed it, or it'll expose you didn't.
right. Hmm.
And if it exposed I didn't, there's hey, I have to be honest.
Yeah,
And you can't blame, but what we found most of the time for us, Frank, because our process is always the same. You submit in
yeah,
72 hours.
yeah.
Like our process, we averaged like for us, it's unbelievable. I think what was the number, Frank? I think our average clear to close last month was 18 days from disclosure to clear to close.
Yeah, we
So when
had.
you have 30-day contracts, Andy gave me the numbers on
I remember.
Friday.
Yeah, we had several that were
It
less
was
than
like
that too.
18
Yeah,
days clear to close.
yeah,
So the reason why that's important is my process doesn't change, whether it's 18 days or 30 days or 45 days. So when I hear what took so long, I'm like, no, 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 no. My documents and data typically show we are crushing it.
hmm,
However, I've had a few where it was like, no, we sat on that one too long, man.
mm,
And I got to
mm,
tell you, hey, Jane, we sat on it 5 days before it went to underwriting.
mm,
And listen, I'd love to tell you there was a reason, but at the end of the day, I'm the leader of this team. It's my
mm,
responsibility.
mm,
But what I can assure you is this: we're going to solve this problem now.
mm,
And I'm a process guy. And
mm,
I believe that processes solve problems.
mm,
And so we're going to build a process to ensure that another file doesn't sit 5 days.
mm,
Because had we caught this 3 days ago, like it should
mm.
have been caught,
Right, right,
we at least would have been able to get out of the option period.
right.
We did.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but you see how I just owned all that?
Hmm.
But you can't own it if you don't know your days,
You got to
because
know
now
your
it's
days.
all it is you took so long and not,
Yeah,
it's the
yeah,
emotion. I can't fight
yeah.
emotion with emotion. It's emotion
Right.
with data.
You need data. Yeah.
That's it.
Good
That's it,
stuff,
man.
Steve.
What a great conversation. Hey,
Yeah,
hey,
man. It's
listen,
good.
you one thing I do, hey, you know, one of the things, and I think about this, part of having the hard conversations, I'd love, if somebody's saying, how do I have an operations team? How do I build a process to where I'm turning no's into yeses? How do I learn more about what you guys are doing at the network, Frank? I think we ought to open it up. If somebody's interested, you and I get the privilege of leading the network, which is where we have loan officers and we have branch managers that plug into this network that we built. It's a community, it's a collaboration, it's coaching. It's something that's so remarkable, that is powered by Success Mortgage Partners. And if somebody wants to learn more about that, because I'll tell you this, the engine you're plugged into makes a difference on how many hard conversations you have to
That's
have.
absolutely true. It's
Well,
absolutely true.
Sarah was talking about it today. She happened to say something on Breakfast Club. She's not had a deal that wasn't able to be closed since she's been with us here for a couple of years at Success Mortgage Partners in
Mm,
the network.
mm,
But you know what the key is? She's had a team go to bat with her on the tough deals and not fight her.
hmm.
And if somebody wants to learn more about that, where would they go, Frank?
Just go to frankcall.com. Frankcall.com. We have a 15-minute conversation. I just had a conversation with a gentleman on Monday,
Yeah,
Steve.
yeah.
I didn't tell this to you, but um, he asked me, he says, "Oh, so you're originating?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I'm originating." I said, "But I don't like actually talk to the borrowers or anything like that. I mean, I may have a brief conversation with them just to hand them off to the
Right,
team. The team takes it from
right.
there." He goes, "Man," he goes, "that's where I really want to be." I said, "Well, you know what, man, you can do it." I
It's
said, "But
available.
here's the most important thing. You have to have the closing department solid as a rock first. Like once a deal goes into contract, you have to be able to hand that off to a team and not worry about it. That has to be in place first. If you got
Right.
that in place first, well, then we can help with the front end stuff, right? We can help figure out, okay, this is, you need a loan partner here, or you need, we can help figure out what the help is that you need on the front end to where you can actually get there. And we have several people in the network that are there, several people that, leads are coming, deals come in, they briefly have a conversation, it's handed off and it's taken care of. Right. And that's where I think that's where everybody really wants to be. Yeah. And so, but you got to have that strong back end. And that's what we have, that the back end, like you were talking about Andy, and, we're closing, we're clear to close in 14 days, typically, or 18 days, whatever. But you need that in place first. And so, anybody's listening to this, if you don't have that, that's where it begins. That's where it really begins. That has to be established. Because if you don't have that, then it doesn't matter what you're doing on the front end, because you'll always be sucked into the back end. And if you're sucked into the back end, you can't do any more on the front end.
Well, here's the litmus test. And this is a real question. I know we're almost at the end, but how many hours this week have you spent on a file or with a client from contract to close?
Right.
And if it's more than an hour, you're spending time on operations instead of selling.
That's right.
You're doing $25 an hour work versus $500 an hour sales.
That's right.
And the key is this: when you solve that, you make more money. That's just the facts and the truth. You get more freedom. You love what you do more.
Totally.
Yeah, because now I'm focused on the sales activity.
Right. I don't have to worry about the back end stuff. There's a lot of work goes into that. And if you got competent people on the back end to take care of it,
we'll show you what we're doing. Frank will show you what we're doing.
FrankCall.com.
Yeah. All right. FrankCall.com.
All right, man. Let's get out of here, Steve.
Conversation, man. All right, brother.
All right. Have a good one. Adios.